Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. I'm Lucas and welcome back to another F123 video where today I'm going to be giving you guys a settings guide. So without further ado, I'm going to be giving you guys, my tips and tricks as to how to get the best out of your settings for you as well. You know, not everything is universal. I want to try and give you guys the right guidance to make, the game set up right for you. So without further ado, assists are... As you would imagine, assists, I run them on Elite, but it is up to you as to what you want to use. On-screen display, I would recommend using full track map, as that is something that I feel like gives you a better overview of what's really going on in the race. I would also recommend that you have permanent session timer on at all times as well. I would have display objective panel off. Virtual rear view mirror is an option. You can customize how big or how much opacity you want on it as well, where you want it on your screen, so you can have that on or off. Start lights I would have on, all these on. That's what I would do on screen display. Generic settings, not really applicable for everything on a wheel. These are some of the trigger settings that I would have off. ERS you can have on hold or toggle, purely preference. MFD car setup I would have on default. Heading onto the wheel settings now, I would use now calibration is very important, as this is where you set up your dead zones and stuff on your pedals. It's very important to get your dead zone set up correctly, as depending on your driving position or what equipment you use, if you start to ride on the brake or the throttle at the wrong moment or unnecessarily pressing it when you don't need to, it's going to cost you lap time. So make sure that you first of all, test your dead zones by, going on your screen. And remember, even if it's on 0, it could be 0.9%. You've got to, make sure that at no point you are, overriding on the throttle and the brake. And this is a great way for you to be able to see if you need like a dead zone on a brake or on a throttle, and what your steering's doing as well. That's how I would check that. Make sure you have your dead zone set up correctly. Brake saturation you can use if you like, if you want to fine tune a little bit more sensitivity into the braking. Personally, you would only really use saturation linearity on anything else in a very weird situation. Otherwise, I would just run these on 0. That's pretty much, you'd be pretty alright if you followed that for most things. Now for the wheel settings, make sure they're on firstly. And vibration and force feedback strength. Honestly, if you're not sure where to begin with this, 70 is, a completely fine value to start with. I would personally not really want to go higher than maybe 80, because once you start going higher and higher, you start clipping more and more, which is where the feedback basically isn't getting any more feeling. You're hitting the limit as to what the feedback is going to output to you in terms of gain. So I would not really want to go way too high on this, past the 75-80 mark. You can drop it down lower if you want as well, but if you go too low when you're direction changing, it'll feel quite weak. Especially when you're shifting weight transfer from left to right, you might not feel like you're getting a lot of load through the steering if you go way too low. So I would say 70, the default value, is actually a good place to start, but this is also dependent on your equipment as well. Sometimes you need to really fire this number up really high, because you don't really get a lot of feeling through maybe a lesser powerful wheel. But if you're on, let's say, a direct drive, 70 is a good starting value, and then you can lower it or higher it to really just fine tune it where you like. It's purely preference when it comes to this as well. There's no direct correct answer, but I would say you just watch that you're not clipping or not generating enough feeling. These effects, if you can run these all at 0 if you really want, and you'll be completely fine. These effects are only really useful at giving you a certain exaggerated feeling that you want to feel, like rumble strip and off-track effects. I would have these two off personally. On-track effect, I've actually used this in the past. You can have this on a little bit, but you can also run it completely off, and it'll be completely fine. So these settings are okay to have completely off. Damper, you can customize this as to your preference as well. You want to have that to whatever strength you want, but I would recommend not going way too high, because then it'll become, you know, really sluggish to, you know, counter steer and get a lot of inputs in sometimes. So if you damp it too heavily, it can actually hinder you quite a bit, so you want to be yeah, quite careful with that. Or you can run damping completely off. Some people don't like damping whatsoever, so yeah. But you can run damping even at 1 and then adjust it on the wheel, and it gives you just enough damping to, you know, have a bit of damping but still be quick. Wheel rotation is as self-explanatory. You can leave it at 360, or you can match it to your wheel rotation that you have on the wheel. That is up to you. And yeah, obviously you have your button mappings that you can activate. I would personally recommend, I have shortcuts for some of these panels so that I don't need to flick through the MFD every time. I also have toggles for the brake bias and the differential, which I find quite useful as well, but that's also because I have the buttons available. But I would recommend that if you do have the buttons available, to, you know, make use of these things. So yeah, those are the wheel settings. Graphic settings wise, you can use that. I mean, for me, I would run them as low as possible if I was being, you know, chasing for FPS. But you can use these on whatever you like. Generally speaking, I would just recommend that if you are using ultra low graphics, make sure your weather effects are all the way off to make sure you're not getting any unnecessary weather effects like that, and make sure your NVIDIA reflex is on low latency with boost. Otherwise, I mean, I don't use motion blur as well. I don't like it personally, but I mean, maybe you do want to have some motion blur to give yourself a bit of a speed immersion. That's completely fine, but me personally, I have it off. Video mode, this is yeah, kind of preferential as well, because it depends on what hardware you've got as well. Resolution, I have, you know, 1080 classic. Full screen, I have it on auto aspect ratio, but I would have it on 16:9 if I had it on anything. VSync off, auto, whatever one, doesn't really matter. Refresh rate is 239. If I usually have the frame rate limit on, I had it off. You know, why did I have it? I don't know why it was off, but I have frame rate limit on. 240 FPS is what I would cap it at. If, you know, hopefully 60 FPS is never a thing again, because I despise it. So hopefully, yeah, we can run, you know, 240 smooth, and I would just cap it at that, just to make sure you're not, you know, bouncing up and down with FPS too much. I use TEA Fidelity X sharpening just because I like the way it looks, but I think you can maybe get more FPS if you use DLSS. Otherwise, I don't really have dynamic resolution on, don't really know enough about it. But yeah, apart from that, that is video mode and the video settings. Audio settings, I have, you know, these are, you know, purely tunable to what you like. I have the driver onboard mix, headphones, light ducking on the engineer speaking. I have ultra low audio sim quality. I have Jakesy on the comms. I have push talk on and mute by default, so that when I join a lobby I don't have my ears destroyed. I don't like upshift tone or anything like that. I have the radio verbosity on responses only, so that when I only hear the engineer when I ask him something. He doesn't speak to me otherwise, which is quite useful if you get annoyed with the engineer. Telemetry settings you can use to, you know, set up whatever you want on the telemetry. If you use that, accessibility options are exactly that. Eye head tracking, crossplay, and that is literally everything on the in-game settings side. But now we're going to have a quick look at some of the wheel settings that you can use on you know, this equipment we have here, to further set up your game. So here we are now for the Fanatec settings that I have got everything off at the moment, because I'm going to go through things one by one. Now, a lot of this is also personal preference, but this is just going to be me talking through things to give you guys a good idea as to how to set things up. So first page we have is wheelbase. Now, obviously, we have the maximum steering angle, which on F1, I would run at 310, but this is very customizable. I mean, in F122 I ran 290, on 2021 I ran 310. This is down to preference. You can run 360, 340, 330, 320. It's down to preference, what you like, your driving style. I have it in 310, but that's down to whatever. Feedback strength is pretty self-explanatory. You can run it at, you know, whatever value you feel comfortable with. Force feedback scaling, I would personally run this on peak, as that for me helps give me a little bit more of a feeling as to what the car is doing in certain situations with the force feedback at varying different speeds. Linear is a little bit more consistent, but I personally just prefer peak just because it gives me a bit more feeling in certain instances. But that's preference. Not everyone uses peak, but I personally would use peak. Natural damper, you can run this off if you really want. That makes the wheel, as you can see, it just bounces off the end stops. There's literally no resistance in the steering wheel at this point. However, if I whack up the natural damping, you can see immediately you're inventing a bit of damping. So natural damping is a good way to get a bit of resistance in the wheel without actually giving the wheel a damper setting. So natural damper is a good one to play around with. You can play around with it at various levels. This is purely custom, playable. I've had it off in the past. I've had it higher. It's purely preference. You just got to find what damper you like. Friction, I don't think I've ever used friction or inertia, to be honest. I've had these off in the past, to be honest. I honestly don't know enough about these settings to really comment on what they do. I've not used them. Interpolation. This is this is a preference setting as well. This basically is how raw the FFB signal you would like. You can when you increase interpolation, you can smoothen the signal that the FFB is giving you and the feeling, but the lower you go, the more noisy and raw that output is. So that is completely down to preference as to what you would like. You can run it, pretty much anywhere within this range, really. I wouldn't go way too high. I wouldn't go as, I'd probably keep it under 6. If I was to give you a rough idea of a range, I would keep it between 0 and 6, but it's completely up to you in the preference. Force effect intensity. Now, this is a setting that is very flexible, generally speaking. I would personally not go lower than 50. 50 for me, 50 is quite smooth on the FEI, but I know people that use it at 100 as well. People have used this at 100. Some people even use it like very low as well, but I would say use it anywhere between 50 and 100. Choose what you like as well. This is a purely customizable setting, as this can give you a lot of it can increase the intensity of certain effects and give you a lot of detail, but it can also get a bit too noisy as well, where it starts to get very rattly if you go too high. So play around with it, see what you think. Steering wheel, again, you have the steering angle. You can see where your steering is. You've got your clutch paddles on this for us. Shock wheel vibration motor. That is the vibration. That is your handles basically vibrating. You can have that on or off. Preference, no correct answer to that. Clutch bite point. That is where your clutch will drop to if you pull both of them in, and you then have a full release on one of them. So that's what that does. Heading on to pedals. Now that is as simple as minimum maximums on clutches, handbrakes. I would have it on manual calibration mode as well. That is the best way to optimize it. If you're not on manual calibration, you will not be getting the best out of it. Make sure you have your dead zones and throttles, everything perfectly set up, and also your brake forces set correctly. Brake force is very customizable, but it also depends on what rubbers you use, all these sort of things. So this, find what you like. There ain't no answer that's going to fit everybody. Heading to the tuning menu. Now, we've already covered the up until interpolation, but now we get, and FEI actually, but now we have 3 of the most important, which is the force, spring, and damper. Now, generally speaking, if you ran, let's say you ran these at 100, all 3 of them, and then just played around with the force feedback to the strength that is comfortable to you, and the same for the FEI to whatever, as we said, whatever one you find you like. If you just play with the like this and find whatever strength you like, you're going to be pretty okay, right? You're not going to be... It's going to give you an okay reference, right? You're not going to be miles away from it. It should give you enough of a feeling to drive with, if that makes sense. So, you can't really go wrong, but it's ultimately then when you start to get a bit more in detail, would you like a little bit less spring, which will, affect, as you say, that affects how the sort of the wheel springs back to you in certain situations. But it depends. You've got the spring, you've got the damper. Damper's important because that ties in with the in-game setting. So if you have in-game damper on, but this off, it's not going to do anything. So you want to make sure if you have the damper on in-game, so let's say 1, this will be an important setting to play with, because you can have 1 damper in game but 120 on this, or 5 damper in game but 30 on this. There's a lot of customizable ways to get different feelings and levels of damper, but that's up to you. But yeah, you can't really go wrong. I mean, you can do. I mean, some you can run the feedback at 100, but then turn these, much lower as well. There's multiple different ways that you can achieve the desired strength and feeling. But generally speaking, and you can also go even up to 120 if you really want to exaggerate a particular force. But generally speaking, if you put them at 100, got this where you want it, set damper to what you want, same with interpolation, and played with your strength, you'll be fine. It'll give you a decent starting place to go from. And yeah, and I also use, as of recording this video, the latest PC drivers, and yeah, as you can see, that's all the latest firmware. But that is really it, I think, for today's video with a settings guide. Thank you very, very much for watching, everybody. Please let me know if this video helps you out. And yeah, let me know how you get on in the comments below. Like and subscribe for more F123 content. Support means the world to me. And yeah, I hope you've been enjoying this F123 content. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao.